Hey guys, tonight we slip into the flickering candlelight of an ancient world where reeds bend beside the slow, murmuring Nile, where the scent of frankincense clings to sandstone walls, and where a breeze rattles through dry date palms like the breath of old gods. You hear the low thrum of drums from a temple in the distance, blending with the slap of sandals on dusty stone floors. Somewhere nearby, a crocodile slides silently beneath the water's surface, patient, unblinking. But you're not a farmer resting after a day's toil. No, you've drawn the short straw. You're the Pharaoh of Egypt, divine on paper, stressed out in reality. Everyone calls you the living god, but judging by your sleep schedule, that title feels like a cruel joke. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes flutter open before the sun dares show itself. The chamber is dim, golden light bleeding gently through narrow slits in the limestone. It's cool now, but that won't last. Already, the stillness is stirring. You lie beneath heavy linens, stiff with embroidery. Around you, murals of falcons and lotuses watch with painted eyes, witnesses to your every blink. You'd think being a pharaoh means you could sleep in just once. Nope. There's a rustle outside the door, the soft padding of bare feet on polished stone. The servants are already assembling. Body servants, perfume bearers, linen drapers, and that one guy who insists on reciting the day's titles as you're still mid-yawn. You rise, because you must. Your first duty of the day isn't ruling, it's existing. Publicly, spectacularly, a breathing emblem of divine stability. The makeup priest is already preparing the malachite paste. Yes, eyeliner. It's not for glam. Well, not just. Insects, sun glare, and the occasional flirtatious glance from a noblewoman all demand a strong, symmetrical wing. You sit while two attendants dab oils into your hair, braiding it with golden thread, as if they're weaving together strands of the Nile itself. They feed you a fig. It's not breakfast, it's symbolism. Your life is a stream of rituals dressed as routines. The fig represents prosperity. The linen you're wrapped in, purity. The fan waving gently beside your face, not comfort, authority. Everything means something, and you don't get to just do things. You embody things. The High Steward approaches with the morning scroll. Another 100 requests, proclamations, and warnings sealed in wax. Your job isn't just to read them, it's to radiate calm while doing so. Pharaohs don't flinch, even if line 7 mentions unrest near Memphis, and something about a baker's son, claiming to be the reincarnation of Horus. You're escorted down the palace corridor, sandals slapping the polished floors, and everyone you pass drops to one knee. It should feel powerful, but honestly, it's exhausting. One sneeze, and the physician is already offering honeyed resin and lotus sap. You're not allowed to be human, which is ironic for someone who's supposed to be a god. And then there's the morning sun ceremony. You arrive at the eastern wall of the temple just as the first rays crest the horizon. Priests chant in rhythmic monotony. You raise your arms because that's what you do. The people believe that without your gesture, the sun won't rise. A cute superstition, unless you're the one held accountable on overcast days. The stone beneath your feet is already warming. A chubby ibis struts across the courtyard like it owns the place. Somewhere near your elbow, a beetle crawls across the carved relief of your father's name. That, by the way, is a whole other layer of stress. Pharaohs don't just die, they linger, judging you through generations of monuments. Historians still argue whether these grand mourning rituals were genuine religious acts or just a massive PR campaign to keep the population in check. Either way, you don't get a say. You perform. Always. You remember yesterday's audience with the foreign emissary who offered you, get this, a giraffe. You nodded serenely while wondering whether anyone has figured out how to feed a giraffe in desert heat. Your court scribes will, of course, sketch the event with meticulous care, ensuring your posture implies divine approval and zero confusion about the logistics of exotic animal husbandry. A mainstream fact you've probably heard: ancient Egyptians believed pharaohs were the sons of Ra, the sun god, but the reality behind that claim is even more claustrophobic than divine. It means you can never weep, never groan, never laugh too hard. One hearty chuckle, and suddenly your advisors are whispering about instability in the royal K. And here's a quirky little tidbit for you. There's evidence some pharaohs used trained baboons to perform temple tasks. That's right. Imagine trying to lead a morning prayer while a monkey wearing gold bangles crashes into a ceremonial vase. After the ritual, you return to the palace, where breakfast awaits. You'd kill for something normal, maybe a date cake and a nap. But today, it's honeyed bread, shaped like lotus petals and watered beer, all presented by trembling servants hoping your expression doesn't mean exile. You remember yesterday's scrolls. Somewhere, a province reports missing grain. Somewhere else, a temple complains their incense shipment is 3 days late. You're not just pharaoh, you're also the middle manager of an empire. By mid-morning, the heat sharpens like a blade. You retreat to a shaded chamber lined with papyrus scrolls and small painted idols. A scribe with an unnervingly nasal voice reads petitions aloud. You're half listening, half dreaming of slipping into the Nile. But again, pharaohs don't swim casually. If you fall in, the priesthood might call it an omen and begin preparations for national mourning. And you really don't want to go through embalming prep while still alive. So, you sit upright, eyelids drooping, pretending to care deeply about a dispute over fish traps in the Delta. This is your life. No peace, no play, no pajama days. Just ritual, appearances, and endless, exhausting symbolism. And the weirdest part? You're probably only 13. You're 13, maybe 14, and you're already exhausted in ways your ancestors never warned you about. Most kids your age are still figuring out how to skip stones or pick papyrus flowers for crushes. You've got 3 tutors, 2 wives, and a personal guard that watches you even when you sneeze. Welcome to your education, royal style. Absolutely no recess, infinite consequences. Your morning rituals have drained you, but the real gauntlet begins now. School. Not the kind with cheerful murals and snacks, No, your lessons take place in the stone chamber behind the Hall of Offerings, under the watchful eye of Merope, high scribe and human boredom personified. His breath smells like dried onions and anxiety, and he's been alive since the first pyramid, or so it seems. His job? To turn you into a wise and just ruler. Your job? To stay awake. He unfurls a fresh papyrus scroll and taps it with his ivory pointer. Today's subject: hieroglyphics. Again, the delicate art of bird snake eye symbols. You've already memorized a few hundred of them, but there are thousands, and each has to be written just right. One mistake and a sentence meant to say glorious triumph might instead read sneezing cow vessel. Not the royal image you're going for. Your Majesty, write this, Mary Pay drones. The god Thoth bestows eternal wisdom upon the crown. You sigh and dip your reed into the ink. It's always Thoth this, Ra's that. Never anything about how tired you are or how much your fingers cramp after 20 scrolls. Your cousin, the one who trains with horses out west, he's probably racing chariots and drinking pomegranate wine right now. You? Still stuck in Deity Calligraphy 101. Mainstream fact alert. Pharaohs weren't just figureheads. They were expected to be incredibly well educated. From mathematics and astronomy to law and theology, the ruling elite had to know a bit of everything, especially if they wanted to command respect from priests, nobles, and enemies alike. And unfortunately, most of that learning happened in youth. Your youth. After hieroglyphs, it's moral philosophy, basically a lecture on Mot, the divine order of the universe. You're expected to not only understand it, but become it, live it, breathe it, represent cosmic balance in every word and gesture, which is a lot for a kid who just accidentally inked a beetle on his scroll. You shuffle to your next tutor, combat and chariot training. Finally, a break from scrolls, sort of. It's less action-packed than you'd hope. The training yard is blisteringly hot, and the sword they hand you is dull for safety. You're taught to pose like a warrior king, arm outstretched, gaze noble. Now, hold that, says the arms master, for half an hour. You wobble, your nose itches, your linen skirt rides up, but the guards are watching. The priests are watching. The gods might be watching too, and they're not big fans of slouching. Quirky fact: some pharaohs were so small when they took the throne that their statues had to be scaled up dramatically to make them look old enough to rule. There's debate about whether one especially famous ruler, coffins hint at a boy not older than 10, ever even made his own decisions. He might have just been a royal puppet with eyeliner. And now, it's time for theology. Again. Always theology. You kneel beside a priest of Osiris as he explains the ritual significance of river reeds and their placement during the Esed festival. You smile politely. Inside, your brain is drifting to lunch. Maybe honey cakes, maybe just quiet. That thought vanishes quickly when a servant whispers something to your steward, who whispers something to your tutor, who then glances at you with mild panic. Someone just said your name wrong in a prayer, out loud, in public. You groan. It's always something. A mispronunciation of your throne name, which, by the way, is 6 words long and includes Lord of the Two Lands twice. Now, there will be a purification ceremony, a symbolic renaming, and 3 hours of very uncomfortable sitting. And through it all, the assumption remains you are divine. Not metaphorically, literally divine. Born from the gods, appointed by the stars, walking on earth as their chosen vessel. Historians still argue whether this godhood was taken seriously by the pharaohs themselves or whether it was a political performance maintained by a very dedicated PR team, i.e., the priesthood. Either way, you play the part, because the price of slipping is unthinkable. Even at this age, you're already aware of it. That tight little whisper in the back of your mind that says, they love you only if you're perfect. One wrong word, one show of weakness, and the pyramid of support beneath you starts to crumble like old mortar. By late afternoon, you're allowed a short recess. You sit in the royal garden beneath a date palm. A pair of sacred ibises strut nearby, looking vaguely judgmental. For a moment, you're alone. Almost. You take a small clay figurine from your belt pouch, something you molded in a rare, unsupervised moment. It's crude, slightly lopsided, and absolutely forbidden. Pharaohs don't play, but for a few quiet breaths, you forget your titles. You are just you. And then, of course, your nursemaid appears with a goblet of pomegranate juice and a scroll titled Reflections on the Sacred Role of Crocodiles. Sigh. The sun slants low across the palace walls now, turning sandstone to gold and shadow. You'd think this means a break, maybe a warm bath, or, dare you dream it, a quiet corner, and no one asking you to recite your lineage backwards in High Egyptian. But no, twilight means court session, and court means drama. You're seated on your carved throne, which looks comfortable, but absolutely is not. Solid stone doesn't yield, even to a divine posterior. There are lions sculpted into the armrests, symbolic power, of course. Real lions would be easier to manage than this parade of nobles, tax collectors, temple overseers, and local governors. The vizier steps forward and bows so deeply you think he might dislocate something. He begins listing petitions. You nod like you're taking it all in, but your brain is drifting. Something about barley taxes in Abydos, a dispute over who owns a particularly sacred goose. And wait, did someone just say a priest fell into a granary? Blessed be his recovery, the vizier says solemnly, moving on. This is how it goes. Every day. An endless carousel of complaints, ceremonies, and small political fires that you're expected to extinguish with a nod, a glare, or a cryptic utterance like, let the river judge him. There's a bit of theater to it all. You speak only when absolutely necessary, and when you do, you must do it in that deep, serene voice your speech tutor makes you practice in the echo chamber. You can't say things like, that's ridiculous, or what now? Instead, you say, let the balance of Ma'at decide, which somehow sounds wiser, even when you're silently screaming inside. And yes, the rumors are true. Sometimes, in the middle of court, someone brings you a kitten, a symbol of Bastet, protector of the home and bringer of joy. You pet the cat, because what else can you do? It's the highlight of your day. Mainstream fact: ancient Egyptian court life was rigidly hierarchical and deeply ritualized. Every person's role was strictly defined, and your job as Pharaoh was to maintain harmony between all parts of society: peasants, priests, generals, scribes, gods, especially the gods. And yet, among the incense and posturing, strange moments happen. Today, a Nubian emissary presents you with a gift: a leopard pelt dyed with crushed berries and lined with silver thread. It's impressive. You nod slowly and smile, and someone makes a note to compose a hymn in honor of your graciousness. But even as you smile, your stomach twists, because now you owe them something: a trade alliance, a ceremonial marriage, one more headache on your already crowded divine plate. Later, you retreat to the Hall of Records, where you're supposed to study the history of your forebears. It's essentially a monument museum, but personalized. Every statue, every scroll, every sarcophagus detail is somehow related to you. That one pharaoh who ruled for 60 years? Great uncle. That other one who died under mysterious circumstances? Definitely someone you're not supposed to bring up. You're expected to learn from their glories and their failures. Of course, no one officially failed, but you notice how some names are chiseled off tablets: airbrushing, ancient style, quirky tidbit. In one royal archive, scholars found a prayer written by a young pharaoh that basically amounts to, "Please don't let me mess this up." Even god kings, it seems, got performance anxiety. You walk the long gallery, trailing your fingers over painted stone. The torches flicker. One statue seems to scowl at you. You scowl back. Historians still argue whether these hallways of ancestors were more about inspiration or intimidation. Was it pride in the family line or pressure to match their glory? You're leaning toward pressure. Back in your private quarters, the hour of purification arrives. You're anointed with oils, your linens are changed, and you're gently reminded that tonight is the new moon ceremony, which means a vigil, which means no early bedtime again. The temple courtyard is bathed in moonlight, or rather, not, because the moon is gone. That's the point. This is when the priests say the veil between worlds thins. You're expected to stand silently, torch in hand, while the high priest chants about Ra's nightly battle through the underworld. There are drums, there's incense, there's that one novice acolyte who keeps almost fainting from the smoke. You're also supposed to reflect on your personal battles: temptation, pride, laziness. You try. But your legs hurt and your mind is foggy with fatigue. You picture a slice of honey melon, or a nice nap, or being a goat herder in the hills. And then, something weird. A jackal howls, echoing through the night. Everyone freezes. You feel the hair on your arms rise. The high priest whispers, "Anubis hears us." You hope that's a good thing. As the ceremony ends, a priest gently sprinkles you with water infused with lotus and myrrh. "Purified," he says, but you still smell faintly of goat from that offering earlier. Divine life is a multisensory affair. At last, you're allowed to sit. Not sleep, sit. In your private chamber, beside a brazier of flickering coals, you stare out the window slits. Beyond the palace, the Nile glimmers in the darkness, ancient and steady. You imagine what it's like to just drift on a reed boat. No advisors, no scrolls, no ceremony. Just the stars, just silence. And then a knock, a message from the astronomer priests. Tomorrow's omen suggests difficulty. You nod sagely. Inside, you groan. You curl up under your linens, eyes heavy, muscles sore. No one tells you this part. How being the living Horus mostly feels like being really, really tired. You are worshipped. You are adored. And yet, you'd trade half your kingdom for a good night's sleep. The sun hasn't even peeked over the horizon when a gentle but persistent hand shakes your shoulder. Your Majesty, someone whispers, too cheerfully for this hour. You groan. Every part of your royal self wants to ignore it, but the day waits for no pharaoh, not even the half-asleep, linen-wrapped, crown-less kind. You're barely upright when the palace steward enters with a scroll. Early reports from Memphis, he says, as if that means anything before breakfast. You glance at the symbols, bleary-eyed. Floodwaters are behaving, barley prices are not, and someone in Thebes insists their crocodile is sacred. Again, you manage a tired nod and stand. It's time to be divine. Again. Today's agenda begins with temple inspection. You ride through the city on a gilded litter, carried by 6 muscular attendants who are definitely stronger than you. Your face is serene, your posture flawless. Inside, you're mostly thinking about bread. As you're carried past bustling markets and crumbling statues, people kneel. Some press their foreheads to the dust. You try not to look too directly at them. The last time you smiled at a farmer, it started a week-long rumor that you were planning to abolish grain taxes. You are not. The temple looms, massive, whitewashed, blinding in the morning sun. Carvings of gods line the walls, Horus, Bastet, Thoth, all judging you in stone silence. You pass through incense clouds and into the inner sanctum, where only the highest-ranking priests and you are allowed. Even your guards wait outside. This is where the gods are said to reside. You perform the daily rites, carefully trained hand gestures, and whispered prayers. You place lotus blossoms at the feet of Amun-Ra's statue and dab scented oil onto its lips, like feeding the divine. Your heart's not in it, but your movements are precise. If you get this wrong, someone will interpret it as an omen of famine, or war, or frogs, always frogs. Mainstream fact: pharaohs weren't just rulers, they were also the high priests of every major temple. Even if they delegated daily rituals, their presence or absence carried cosmic weight. One missed ritual could theoretically unravel the balance of the universe. No pressure. After the ceremony, you're guided into the temple archives. Here, walls are lined with clay tablets, scrolls, and offerings. You're shown recent records, donations, votive statues, a particularly detailed diagram of a goose sacrifice. You nod wisely, resisting the urge to ask why every goose must be depicted mid-squawk. A scribe reads aloud a hymn composed in your honor. The metaphors are wild. He whose breath renews the river, whose fingers outshine the ibis wing, and your personal favorite, the eyelid of the cosmos. You blink slowly. Fitting, you suppose. You return to the palace by mid-morning, stomach growling. Finally, food. You're served a tray of delicacies: honeyed bread, figs, salted duck, and something pickled that smells like regret. You eat under supervision, of course. Every bite must appear graceful, sacred, and inoffensive. No slurping, no licking fingers. You're being watched on three servants, a priest, and a dog that definitely doesn't understand etiquette. Quirky fact: some royal meals were seasoned with powdered lapis lazuli, not for flavor, but for spiritual purification. Basically, you were eating ground up gemstones because someone thought it kept your aura shiny. After your meal, you finally get a brief moment to yourself. A scribe brings you your personal diary, a rare privilege. You flip through yesterday's entry. Must remember to ask what cosmic eyelid means. You smirk and jot down a new line. Wish I were a fisherman or a cat. Of course, solitude doesn't last. You're summoned to the garden for a diplomatic tea. That's code for listen to someone older than the pyramids drone on about border issues. You sit under a sycamore tree while the governor of the Delta region waves his arms and says words like irrigation rights and hereditary stewardship. You smile and nod and wonder what it would feel like to climb a tree barefoot. Historians still argue whether pharaohs actually held real political power in daily matters or whether the viziers ran the show while the king was paraded like a divine puppet. Based on your experience, it's both. You're a symbol, yes, but symbols with opinions can still start wars or accidentally end trade agreements. You return to your chamber, barely dodging a group of musicians practicing for tonight's banquet. A lyre string snaps as you pass. A sign? Maybe. Or just bad tuning. You decide to walk to the roof. From there, you can see the city spread out like a painted scroll. The Nile curves gently in the distance, its banks speckled with huts, barges, and life. It smells like dust and fish and wet reeds. You inhale deeply, then someone sneezes behind you. It's your bodyguard. You sigh. You are almost alone. Back inside, the chief architect wants to show you plans for a new statue. 100 cubits high, he says proudly. You'll be carved holding a lotus and a mace, symbolic balance of peace and strength. You ask, "Can I just be sitting?" He laughs, then realizes you're serious. No statue of a sitting pharaoh. It implies fatigue, and we can't have the gods looking tired. You glance at the plans. "Make my nose smaller," you say, "and my eyebrows more majestic." He bows. "As you wish, O breath of the sun." You're not even sure what that one means anymore. The sun is setting again, bathing the city in burnt orange. Your day ends where it began, wrapped in ritual, cloaked in performance, burdened by the constant pressure to embody perfection. You slip into your night linens. Your servant smooths a cream of frankincense across your temples. "To calm the divine thoughts," he says gently. But your thoughts are anything but calm. Just one quiet day. Just once. No scrolls, no inspections, no rituals involving goats. You close your eyes. Outside, the cicadas hum. Inside, the world still waits on your every breath. You're up before the priests today. Not because you're well rested, absolutely not, but because dreams kept waking you, strange ones. In one, your statue walked off its pedestal and told you to switch careers. In another, you were stuck inside a pyramid with no doors and a very sarcastic ibis. You're starting to think your subconscious needs therapy or fewer nighttime fig snacks. This morning, there's an unusual buzz in the palace. Servants rush past with trays of gold-threaded cloth. Two courtiers argue in whispers near the courtyard gate. A third person is crying about someone's sandals being cursed. You stretch, crack your back, and mentally brace for whatever new chaos awaits. The vizier meets you with a deep bow. Today, O living Horus, we receive the foreign envoys. Ah, that explains the fuss. Envoys mean diplomacy, gifts, speeches, and most critically, another long day of being polite. You'd almost prefer a sandstorm. You're quickly dressed in ceremonial attire, not the usual pleated kilt, but something far grander. There's a leopard skin sash across your chest, a golden collar so heavy it makes your neck ache, and enough eyeliner to qualify as a competitive bird of paradise. You're handed a crook and flail, symbols of power, and not, as you once joked, farming tools you process to the Hall of Columns, where the foreign emissaries await. They stand nervously beneath towering, painted pillars, flanked by guards holding feathered fans. One group is from Byblos, another from Nubia, and there's even a contingent from the Hittites, all of them sweating under the Egyptian sun and trying not to look too impressed. Mainstream fact: Egyptian pharaohs held immense influence across the ancient world. Neighboring states sent tribute to curry favor, fearing not only Egypt's military strength, but also its religious significance. Aligning with Egypt was like aligning with the divine itself. You sit on the throne, back straight, expression unreadable. The visitors bow, one after the other, and begin presenting their offerings. First up, ivory combs and ostrich feathers from Nubia. You nod approvingly, pretending you don't already have an entire room full of ostrich feathers. Next, a delicate cedar box from Byblos. Inside are tiny glass beads, impossibly blue. You raise an eyebrow. That color's rare. Even your own artisans can't replicate it easily. Then the Hittites step forward with what they think is the pièce de résistance: a caged monkey. It's tiny, loud, and currently flinging something unpleasant at your general. You smile graciously and murmur, "May your land be blessed with many fruits." Translation: take the monkey home. Each envoy delivers a flowery speech about your greatness. You respond with calm platitudes like, "Let the Nile flow between our peoples," and "The sun shines equally on loyal friends." It's exhausting. You miss sarcasm. Diplomacy has no room for eye rolls. But there's a moment, halfway through the ceremony, that catches your attention. One of the envoys mentions a rare lunar eclipse happening soon, one their seers say is an omen. Your priest, standing nearby, shifts uncomfortably. You make a mental note to ask about it later. Eclipses tend to make everyone panic, especially the scribes, who start redrawing the entire calendar at the drop of a shadow. Historians still debate whether these international relationships were mostly ceremonial or actually involved true negotiation. Based on the sheer number of scrolls you sign, you'd wager it's both, just with a lot of incense and flattery baked in. As the ceremony wraps up, dancers swirl through the hall. They're part of the entertainment, meant to show Egypt's beauty and grace. You're supposed to watch serenely, but your stomach grumbles. You haven't eaten since dawn, and someone's carrying a tray of honey cakes just out of reach. You wonder briefly if you could order a dance break/snack break. Finally, the guests are escorted out to feast. You, meanwhile, must retreat for more ritual purification. Something about the presence of foreign hands requiring spiritual realignment. You've lost count of how many times you've been purified this week. You could probably purify a goat by proximity at this point. Quirky tidbit: in some Egyptian temples, sacred cats were tasked with cleansing visitors by brushing past them before major ceremonies. The fluffier the cat, the holier the experience. You really wish this were still common practice. A fluffy cat sounds ideal right now. Once purified, again, you're taken to your study chamber. It's time for lessons. Yes, lessons. Being a god king doesn't exempt you from education. Your tutor, a man with the patience of a crocodile and the hairline of a half-eaten onion, opens a fresh scroll. Today, military formations and the poetry of conquest, he says, as if that makes it more fun. You sit through an hour of diagrams showing chariot positioning, flanking maneuvers, and optimal spear-throwing distances. You doodle a fish wearing a crown in the margins. Your tutor pretends not to notice. After that, poetry, epic verses about your ancestors' battles, usually ending in lines like, "And the sand turned red with the tears of our enemies." You nod solemnly while stifling a yawn. You're not sure if you'll ever lead an army yourself, but pretending to know how is part of the job. Later in the afternoon, you visit the artisans' district. This is actually enjoyable. You like seeing things get made: statues, jewelry, amulets, even the absurdly tall headdresses for temple dancers. Today, they're working on your funeral mask. Yes, your mask. No pressure. It's already half finished. Golden, serene, with the traditional cobra and vulture on the brow. You stare at it, wondering what people will think when they look into those blank eyes centuries from now. Will they see wisdom, majesty, just another overly shiny face? The head artisan approaches nervously. "Would you prefer more eyeliner?" he asks. You squint at the mask. "Yes, and maybe a smirk?" He looks startled. You shrug. Eternity's a long time to be serious. It's the middle of the night when they wake you again. This time, it's not the usual whispery priest or anxious servant. It's the chief astronomer, looking like he's aged 20 years in the past 10 minutes. "Your radiance," he breathes. "The stars are arguing." You sit up slowly, not because you're alarmed, but because you just finished dreaming about swimming in honey and you're still trying to process that. The astronomer leads you out to the palace roof where the night sky stretches, clear and velvet black. The constellations, those gods and beasts etched in starlight, shine as they always do. But tonight, something's off. A strange red glimmer pulses just above the horizon. The dog star rose early, he murmurs, and there's a second tail on the great scorpion. You look. Sure enough, a faint trail like smoke curls from the scorpion's edge. It could be nothing, or everything. When you're Pharaoh, the line between astronomy and apocalypse is uncomfortably thin. Mainstream fact: ancient Egyptians relied heavily on celestial events for both farming and prophecy. The heliacal rising of Sirius, the dog star, heralded the Nile flood and was crucial to their calendar. Missing it wasn't just inconvenient, it was cosmic disorder. You whisper, "Should we call the high priest?" "We already did," he replies, eyes fixed on the stars. "He fainted." Excellent. You spend the rest of the night cross-legged on the cold stone tiles, listening to nervous readings of lunar charts. Someone brings warm beer and honey cakes, probably to soothe the gods, or the astronomers, or you. A priest in training, barely taller than your ceremonial staff, tries to read a scroll upside down. "Does this mean we're cursed?" he asks. You sigh, only mildly. By dawn, the strange glow fades. The stars resume their usual celestial arrogance. The crisis is technically over, but the priesthood will write 3 contradictory interpretations of it by breakfast. You head back to your chamber and collapse. You've barely closed your eyes when the daily duties begin again. Today's delight, a public procession. You don't get to ride in a chariot or even wave from a balcony. No, you're walking through the city in 105-degree heat, dressed like an altar. A line of officials in white linen fans out before and behind you, chanting praises as you pass. Citizens throw lotus petals, kneel, weep, and occasionally yell things like, "Bless my goats." You try not to trip on the decorative sandals they made you wear. They look divine. They feel like knives. Quirky fact: pharaohs were often carried in processions, but occasionally walked to bless the land with their footsteps. This tradition was less about exercise and more about magical contact. Your royal souls were literally fertilizing the soil with divine power. The procession leads to a massive open square where a statue of you, yes, another one, will be unveiled. You prepare your best neutral smile as the curtain drops. It's gigantic and impressively accurate, down to the crease in your forehead. "Does it blink?" you ask. The sculptor stammers, "We tried. The mechanism jammed." You step forward, anoint the statue's feet with oil, and declare it a worthy likeness. Everyone cheers. Secretly, you're wondering if the fella could have been smaller. Again. After the square, you're led to a public court session. Anyone with a grievance can approach. It's all very ceremonial. You're surrounded by advisors and judges who handle most of it. But sometimes you step in. A farmer begs for a neighbor's canal to be rerouted. A merchant accuses a baker of selling bread, cursed by a jealous god. A child wants their donkey back. You listen, nod, occasionally say, "Let Maat guide this decision," which is a polite way of saying, "I hope someone else fixes this." Historians still argue whether the pharaoh truly served as judge in everyday disputes or just presided symbolically. Based on how many emergency bread curses you've now handled, you're leaning toward symbolism. With side helpings of chaos, you leave court under a parasol held by an exhausted page. The walk back is slow. The streets shimmer with heat. Vendors yell about pomegranates and fish. A stray cat follows you for 3 blocks before being scooped up by a palace servant who bows to it. Honestly, fair. Back inside, you stop by the scribe's wing. Here, dozens of men sit cross-legged on reed mats, scribbling furiously on papyrus. They're copying prayers, tax receipts, recipes, and what looks suspiciously like fan fiction involving Osiris and a talking giraffe. You lean over one scroll. What's this? A guide to dream interpretation, your radiance. Oh good, you say. Last night I dreamt I was being chased by a harp. The scribe frowns. Did the harp speak? It might have. He nods sagely. That means you're ignoring an emotional truth. You blink at him. Or I had too many dates before bed. You leave the scribes to their mystical musings and visit the palace aviary. You find birds calming, dignified, loud when necessary. You share a quiet moment with a sacred ibis who stares at you with ancient disdain. There's peace here for 3 minutes. Then your general arrives to remind you of tonight's military planning banquet. You groan. Can I feign divine sleep? He doesn't answer. You dress again. New kilt, fresh coal, gold cuffs. By now, you're practically armor-plated in accessories. The banquet hall is sprawling, filled with roasted meats, gleaming goblets, and one very persistent harpist, hopefully unrelated to your dream. Generals shout over dancers. Scribes take notes on who coughed during whose speech, and someone sets fire to a date tart. You're seated at the head of the table. It's expected you'll give a toast. You rise, lift your cup, and say, "To peace and quiet." Everyone laughs. You sit back down and whisper, "Seriously, just 5 minutes of it." The night stretches long, filled with strategy maps and exaggerated war stories. You smile, nod, sip wine, and plan tomorrow's escape. Maybe you'll visit the crocodiles. They don't ask questions. You wake up with a crook in your neck and a parrot on your windowsill screaming something that sounds suspiciously like, "I am the sun." It's probably imitating you, which is awkward. The sun is already hot, filtering in through the carved stone shutters in long amber beams. Outside, the city is waking up. Merchants arranging figs, temple bells clanging, donkeys protesting the start of the day. You roll over and mumble into your pillow, "Let someone else be divine for a few hours." But the royal schedule does not negotiate. Your steward enters with the morning report. A collapsed granary roof, 2 scribes fighting over ink, and, because the gods have a sense of humor, a sacred crocodile that wandered out of its pool and is now blocking the palace latrine. You nod grimly. Send it my regards. Today's main event, another temple ceremony, specifically a ritual honoring the gods of rebirth. You'd think this would involve flowers and soft chanting. It does not. Instead, it means spending 3 hours inside a dark sanctum lit only by oil lamps, listening to priests chant in a language that even they don't fully understand. You're pretty sure one of the hymns translates to, "May your enemies get papyrus cuts." Mainstream fact. Ancient Egyptian religion centered on cycles of life, death, and rebirth. The pharaoh, as divine intermediary, was responsible for maintaining Ma'at, cosmic balance. Ceremonies reinforced not only social order, but the literal functioning of the universe, from the rising sun to the flooding Nile. You're dressed in traditional white linen today, but it's soaked with perfume and ritual oils, most of which smell like if cinnamon married pine sap. A priest applies a paste to your forehead and whispers that it will align your spirit with the gods. It also makes you itch. Inside the temple's innermost room, you approach the statue of Osiris. It's swaddled in green cloth, his crook and flail crossed over his chest. The priestess lights incense, and the room begins to shimmer with heat and smoke. You place offerings, barley, beer, and a pomegranate, because you once heard Osiris had a fondness for them. No one's corrected you, so the tradition stuck. Then comes the strange part, the ritual silence. 5 full minutes where everyone stands completely still, as if awaiting a sign. You once sneezed during this. The resulting panic lasted a week. After the ceremony, you step back into the blinding sun, eyes watering. The head priest catches up to you and whispers, "We believe the rebirth energy is strong this year." You nod solemnly. May it also help that Crocodile find a new bathroom. You head to the palace library next. It's not what you think. No towering shelves or ladders. It's mostly scrolls, clay tablets, and several perpetually frustrated scribes hunched over reed desks. One of them greets you, waving an unusually heavy tablet. "We finished the record of your judgment yesterday." "Which one?" you ask. "The one where you forgave that farmer who cursed the moon." "Ah, yes, that one. You'd ruled it accidental sorcery, which was apparently enough to make it a legend in 4 villages. Historians still debate whether the pharaoh was truly literate or simply surrounded by literate people. You can read, thank you very much, but mostly the important things, like ceremonial hymns, dream dictionaries, and snack invoices. You leaf through a new scroll titled Seasonal Offerings, What the Gods Want, and When. It's color-coded. You consider gifting it to the high priest with a note. "Please stop offering fish on Ra's day." From the library, you make your way to the roof garden. This is your favorite part of the palace, elevated above the noise, filled with palms, lotus pools, and bees who are surprisingly well-behaved for insects that can sting. Quirky tidbit: some Egyptian palaces had elevated gardens irrigated by pulley systems or buckets hauled up from wells. These were considered divine spaces, mirroring the lush fields of the afterlife. You sit beside a shallow pool, dangling your feet in the water, and let the silence soak in. A gardener offers you a lotus bloom. You accept it and place it behind your ear. It smells like sunrise. A servant brings you dates stuffed with honey and a fermented fig drink that makes your eyes water. You sip and watch the sky. Birds circle. Somewhere below, a street musician plays a mournful melody on a flute made from a goat bone. It's oddly soothing. You start composing your own hymn in your head. "O mighty goat, O hollowed tube, play me through dusk and clear my mood. Thy bleats become beats, thy hooves divine. Now get this tune stuck in time." You chuckle at your own brilliance, then immediately forget the last line. It's for the best. An urgent message arrives just as you're contemplating another nap. One of the royal tombs has been found looted. Again. You sigh. Tomb robbers are the termites of Egyptian royalty, persistent, resourceful, and utterly without reverence. You're taken to the necropolis outside the city where guards have formed a perimeter. The tomb belongs to a prince who died a century ago. It's been breached. The stone door is cracked, and inside, chaos. Amulets scattered, the burial mask missing. One of the guards is nervously clutching a torch and whispering prayers under his breath. You step inside. The smell hits first. Ancient incense, musty linen, and something that might once have been beef jerky. Mainstream fact. Tomb robbing was both common and severely punished. While pyramids were initially built as impenetrable fortresses for the dead, over time, robbers learned to tunnel, pry, and even bribe their way inside. Some tombs were looted within years of being sealed. You inspect the damage. It's bad, but not unusual. You order the high judge to increase patrols and have the tomb sealed with a new curse. The scribe asks what the curse should say. You think for a moment. May your sandals always chafe? He blinks. That's it? You nod. Emotionally devastating. Back at the palace, you're silent as the sunset glows red over the city. Your advisor appears with a soft voice. We've prepared your private chamber for rest. You smile. No more harp dreams, please. He bows. I make no promises. You're awoken just before dawn. Not by priests, not by servants, not even by the sun this time, but by an owl hooting directly into your face. Through the open lattice window, it perches boldly on your balcony, blinking with an expression that seems to say, "You forgot the moon offering, genius." You sigh and toss a cushion toward it. The owl flies off, probably to deliver an omen elsewhere. You rise, groggy, rubbing your temples. The palace is quiet, for now. You tiptoe past the sleeping guards in the hallway, one snoring into his spear, and head toward the southern wing. There's something special planned today, your ceremonial visit to the royal tomb architects. Exciting, if you enjoy spending time in dark, dusty holes in the earth with people who argue about rock angles. But it's part of the job. Mainstream fact. Pharaohs often began work on their tombs as soon as they took the throne. These were grand, labyrinthine structures, pyramids at first, later hidden valley tombs, meant to protect both the body and the soul for eternity. That kind of construction takes decades and a truly absurd number of bricks. As you step into the cool morning air, a chariot awaits, because for once, you're allowed to ride instead of walk. You hop in with perhaps too much enthusiasm and almost lose your ceremonial headpiece. The driver pretends not to notice. The ride to the tomb site takes you across low hills where desert meets farmland. You pass rows of workers starting their day, heads bowed, sandals slapping dry earth. Some call out blessings. One yells something about fixing the statue's nose, which you try to ignore. At the base of a limestone cliff, the foreman meets you with a bow, so deep it looks physically painful. Your eternal presence, he says. We've completed the new burial chamber expansion. Great, you reply. Is this the version where I get a private bath in the afterlife? He hesitates. It may depend on drainage. You're led into the tomb's inner hall by torchlight. The walls are painted with vivid scenes. Your victories, your offerings to the gods, your symbolic face on the body of a lion. You stop in front of one panel. Did you give me 6 fingers? The artist appears, looking sheepish. We thought it made you look more powerful. It makes me look like I could play 2 harps at once. You walk deeper into the antechamber where masons are working on the sarcophagus. It's a massive stone box, carved with hieroglyphs and flanked by 2 jackals. Someone's written a small joke in the dust. Pharaoh naps here. You wipe it clean, trying not to smile. Quirky tidbit. Workers on tombs would sometimes leave hidden graffiti, everything from jokes to messages to friends. Archaeologists have found notes like Happy New Year, and Seneb was here scrawled behind decoration panels. You speak with the head architect about airflow, trap mechanisms. You suggested bees last time. They were not accepted. And your ultimate design preferences. Just make sure no one can break in. He nods. We've added a false door, a hidden shaft, and a cursed snake carving. What does the curse say? Mostly puns. You approve, with enthusiasm. As you leave the tomb, squinting in the midday glare, your stomach growls. Time for a working lunch, which today is set beside a small oasis, a change of pace, and maybe a chance to escape the endless palace echoes. You sit on a woven mat under the shade of a sycamore fig tree. Servants bring roasted goose, figs, lentils, and beer, chilled in clay jars cooled underground. A flute player stands nearby, attempting a cheerful tune that ends up sounding like a frog in distress. You nod politely. Very moving. Mid-meal, your military advisor arrives, dusty and annoyed. He kneels beside you and whispers, "There are rumors. In the south, a possible rebellion." You take a bite of goose. Of course there are. It's a Tuesday. He lays out a map. It shows a smudge of villages near the border. They've stopped sending grain, he says. They're invoking a local deity, a frog goddess. Do we not have a frog goddess already? No, at least not officially. You sigh and tap the map. Fine. Send an envoy. Offer them barley, a sacred banner, and tell them we'll add the frog to the pantheon if they behave. Historians still argue whether Egyptian gods were invented top-down by priests or absorbed bottom-up from local folk beliefs. Judging by today's situation, it's definitely both. The divine bureaucracy is real. After lunch, you return to the palace and visit the treasury, an intimidating vaulted room filled with bronze scales, tax scrolls, and one particularly surly goose trained to honk at anyone who gets too close to the gold. You inspect offerings from the provinces, silver rings, lapis lazuli beads, dyed linen, perfumes, and something labeled miracle sand from a merchant who talks very fast. You pocket a vial. It sparkles. You suspect it's just regular sand with glitter. The overseer of taxes bows deeply. Your glory, we've surpassed last year's intake by 3,000 measures of barley. Perfect, you say. Add it to the crocodile fund. He looks confused. We have a crocodile fund? We do now. You retreat to your chamber for a moment of rest. You open a scroll, but the words swim on the page. You lie back on a carved cedar bed, the mattress stuffed with papyrus and dreams. A breeze filters in. You almost drift off until a loud trumpet blares from the courtyard. You sit up, alarmed. Please let that be a wedding, not an invasion. Turns out It's a delegation from Nubia arrived early with gifts and questions and an elephant. You throw on your finest linen robe, muttering about timing, and march back out into the day like the regal swamp god you've become. You're still rubbing sleep from your eyes when you face the Nubian delegation, standing proudly in your reception courtyard like a well choreographed parade. They've brought dancers, incense, and yes, an actual elephant draped in turquoise linen with bells tied to its ears. The elephant snorts, you snort back. A silent agreement is made. Neither of you really wants to be here right now. The leader of the delegation, a tall woman in a gold-feathered headdress, bows and presents a gift. A carved obsidian mirror, polished so finely you can see both your reflection and your exhaustion. You smile politely. "May our lands remain peaceful," she says, with just the hint of a wink. Or at least mildly inconvenienced, you reply. Diplomatic rituals commence, formal toasts, exchanges of symbolic objects, the reading of flower-scented scrolls, filled with praises so flowery they practically sneeze. The scribes record everything. One of them pauses to sketch the elephant. Another just writes, "Tall, very shiny." Mainstream fact. Egypt and Nubia had a long and complex relationship, sometimes rivals, sometimes allies, often trading partners. Nubia supplied Egypt with gold, ivory, and exotic animals, while Egyptian culture and politics influenced Nubian kings in turn. The boundary between foreign and familiar was blurry and fluid. You offer the visitors a place in the guest wing, complete with palm wine, dancers, and a cooling pool. The elephant, you're told, will sleep in the royal garden. You glance toward your precious lotus blooms. They do not stand a chance. By midday, your advisor is back, waving another scroll. The priesthood wants an audience. You groan. Another ceremony? No, a complaint. Ah, joy. The high priest is already waiting in the audience chamber. Standing beside a large clay tablet, he's fuming in that quiet, overly polite way religious figures have mastered. "Your Holiness, we've discovered heresy in the temple district." You raise an eyebrow. "Was it the moon sneezer again?" "No," he says darkly. "It's the scribes." Apparently, a group of young scribes, emboldened by wine and poetic frustration, have begun composing alternative hymns, satirical ones. One verse was found carved beneath a statue of Thoth, reading, "O wise ibis, master of words, why do your feet smell like old scrolls?" You laugh, out loud. The priest does not. Quirky tidbit. While Egyptian society revered the gods, humor still crept in around the edges. Parodies of religious texts, animal-headed jokes, and even cheeky graffiti have been found by archaeologists, suggesting that not everyone took divine perfection at face value. You assure the priest it'll be handled, and by handled, you mean giving the young poets some busy work, copying tax records until their fingers fall off. You step out into the upper courtyard and see a familiar face, the royal dream interpreter. She's waiting beside a shaded bench, holding a small reed notebook and a perfectly straight posture, as if she's spent years sitting on stone. "I had another one," you admit, sitting down. She nods. "Was it the bees again?" "No. This time I was sailing through the stars on a boat made of teeth." She does not blink. Very auspicious. She flips open her notebook and murmurs, "Travel dream, symbolic of journey between realms. Teeth boat indicates wisdom carried by ancestral strength." You raise a finger. "Could also mean I need a new dentist." She nods. "Both can be true." Historians still argue whether Egyptian dream interpreters were actual mystics or just very creative therapists. You suspect they were both. Or maybe just really bored, given how many dreams involved cats and falling into rivers. The heat of the afternoon deepens. You escape to the Temple of Thoth for what is optimistically called an intellectual pause. The scribes there offer you papyrus tea, bitter, brown, and effective. One of them reads you a newly translated tale, a farmer arguing with his donkey about existential philosophy. You sip your tea. You listen. You wonder if you're the donkey. The temple walls are covered in stories. The weighing of hearts, Ra's nightly journey through the underworld, a lizard-headed goddess who may or may not have been invented during a particularly warm summer. You pause before a mural of the pharaoh, giving gifts to the gods. The artist gave you a very heroic chin. "Do I really look like that?" you mutter. The scribe beside you squints. "A little?" If you squint and tilt your head, you reward him with a papyrus scroll titled Beetles and Their Mystical Uses. He looks thrilled. You return to the palace just in time for dinner, a more formal one this evening, thanks to your foreign guests. The great dining hall is lit with bronze oil lamps that cast long shadows over gold-inlaid pillars. The floor is polished to a mirror shine. You're briefly blinded by your own sandals. Tonight's menu is excessive even by your standards. Grilled catfish in pomegranate glaze, honey-roasted chickpeas, lotus-stuffed quail, and a platter of pickled cucumbers that no one ever touches but always appears anyway. You're seated beside the Nubian leader, who's clearly enjoying herself. She leans in. "Your people sing to your food before eating it. Is that common?" You blink. "Only if it was well prepared." She laughs. You're not sure if she's mocking you or joining in. Either way, you like her. A servant pours blue lotuses wine, more potent than it looks. You feel your muscles melt into the throne as the room softens around the edges. Somewhere near the musicians, the elephant sneezes. You close your eyes for a second. When you open them, someone is reciting a poem about the stars and sandals and the sadness of forgotten gods. It's oddly moving. You lean over to your scribe. "Make sure we keep that one. Just fix the sandals bit." The night ends with music, fire jugglers, and a tame lion that parades through the hall wearing a gold collar. The lion sits beside you for a moment and yawns. You whisper, "Same, buddy." Then you rise, thank the guests, and leave the party, just as a chorus starts chanting a song that repeats the phrase, "Great one, beloved by bees," far too many times. You retire to your chamber, feet aching, head spinning, eyelids heavy. You lie back on your bed, pull a linen sheet over your chest, and finally, sleep. No owls, no dreams, just silence. You wake to the soft shuffling of sandals outside your chamber and the unmistakable scent of morning incense, juniper and crushed myrrh, thick enough to imply something formal is about to ruin your plans for a quiet day. Again, a servant appears, silently holding a scroll sealed in blue wax. You break it open with your thumbnail, still half asleep. It reads, "Inspection of the Royal Naval Yards, today." You squint. "Did I schedule this?" The servant shrugs. You grumble and throw on a fresh robe, one that says, I care about maritime logistics, but only slightly. You're halfway through your first date-sweetened barley cake when a courtier arrives with your official inspection headdress, a gold circlet shaped like a crocodile rowing a boat. You sigh, subtle. The naval yards are along the Nile's eastern bank, not far from the palace, but far enough that your sandals are full of grit by the time you arrive. Wooden hulls glint under the rising sun, stacked like sleeping crocodiles. Ropes creak, sails snap in the breeze, and workers shout over the rhythmic clatter of tools. Mainstream fact: the Egyptian Navy wasn't just military, it was also the backbone of the kingdom's trade, transportation, and ceremonial processions. Ships carried goods, troops, grain, and sacred idols up and down the Nile. Even pharaohs had personal barges, tricked out with luxurious lounges and sun decks. Centuries before, cruise ships ruined the concept. You're greeted by the dockmaster, who appears to have not blinked since sunrise. Your eternal tide, he says, bowing deeply. Shall we begin the tour? Let's, you reply, eyeing the ladder onto a ceremonial boat with mild dread. You climb aboard the flagship, the breath of Ra, careful not to trip on the freshly scrubbed deck. The boat smells of salt, cedar wood, and wet rope. The captain stands at attention, beard waxed into curls, eyes fierce as a hawk. She's ready to sail at your command, he says proudly. Great, let's not. You inspect the deck, the storage compartments, and the hidden compartment for sacred texts and backup scrolls. One crew member offers you a pickled duck egg as a snack. You decline, politely but firmly. Below deck, the crew sleeps in hammock slings and stores tools in hollowed-out oars. You duck your head to avoid getting brained by a swinging anchor chain and make a mental note. No low-ceiling inspections before breakfast. Quirky tidbit: some royal barges had onboard shrines to river gods with miniature altars and offerings, in case the Nile got moody mid-journey. Ancient sailors weren't just skilled, they were extremely cautious and superstitious. Back on land, you're treated to a demonstration. The newly trained boatmen row in unison, chanting a rhythm that's part song, part insult to other boat crews. You raise an eyebrow. Is that one line about my nose? They stop rowing. Yes, Your Radiance, the lead rower confesses, but only metaphorically. You wave it off. Just make sure it's catchy. Suddenly, a messenger arrives on horseback, dusty and breathless. He bows and hands over a second scroll. This one is red-sealed, and you can already tell it's going to be dramatic. You open it. A merchant caravan has gone missing near the Red Land, what the Egyptians called the deserts beyond the fertile banks. It was transporting incense, glass beads, and something ominously labeled royal novelty items. You pinch the bridge of your nose. Of course, send a scout and a camel and a polite letter threatening divine thunder if anyone's trying to ransom my novelty items. Historians still argue whether the Red Land was a true threat zone or a convenient explanation for anything that went missing. Either way, it definitely had bandits, scorpions, and the occasional bored deity. You leave the docks, brushing ship dust from your robe, and return to the palace in time for the midday cooling ceremony. Yes, it's real. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. You're led into a shaded garden courtyard where acolytes gently pour chilled water over your shoulders while waving palm fronds and softly chanting your 5 official titles. One gets stuck and says, "He who rules over," and then just hums. You glare. Try, "He who notices mistakes." The day marches on. Later, you visit the Royal Mint, a hot, smoky chamber filled with clinking bronze molds and grumpy workers. Here, your face is pressed into coins, amulets, and ceremonial weights used to measure barley and silver. You inspect one batch and notice something alarming. Why does my nose look like it's melting? The engraver flinches. The mold shifted, or maybe it's interpretive. Fix it, you say, or the next mold will be your footprint. He bows repeatedly and scurries away. You pocket a coin, just one, and tell your scribe, "In case I need to bribe the crocodile again." The scribe doesn't ask for context. You take a quick detour through the House of Healing, a temple-hospital hybrid where physicians tend to patients with a blend of prayer, herbs, and complicated-looking leeches. One healer shows you a remedy made from moldy bread, crocodile dung, and pounded copper. "For headaches," he says brightly. You raise your eyebrows. "And for clearing the room, I assume," he beams. "That too." You praise his ingenuity and escape before anyone tries to smear ointment on you. By early evening, you're back in the palace garden, just in time for the sunset offering. A priest lights incense at the base of the obelisk while you toss a bundle of lotus petals into the fountain, muttering a quick prayer to Mayat for balance, peace, and a day without owls. A breeze stirs the papyrus reeds. Dusk paints the sky in streaks of gold and garnet. For the first time in what feels like weeks, you sit. Just sit. You watch as 2 cats stalk a beetle near the fish pond. The beetle escapes. The cats pretend they didn't care anyway. You smile. You're Pharaoh. You're tired. But you've survived another day. Your eyes are half closed, your limbs slack, and your body just beginning to sink into the cool marble of your evening bench when, naturally, a gong sounds in the distance. Not just any gong. The bad news gong. You groan. What now? The High Vizier approaches, expression serious enough to kill a frog at 20 paces. He bows low, adjusts his wig, and says, "Your Holiness, there's unrest in the Northern District. Something about taxes, grain quotas, and a statue of you that someone filled with bees." You blink. Bees? He nods. A protest, apparently, and a metaphor. You sigh and rise. Get my sandals. The good ones. You travel by chariot this time, hooves clapping over the dusty roads as you head toward the administrative quarter, also known as the place where everyone argues about numbers and nobody ever smiles. As your chariot slows to a halt, you spot the problem immediately. A crowd has gathered near the market square. A few hold signs, very artistically drawn papyrus scrolls with slogans like "Grain pain is not divine," and "Even Ra would ration fairly." In the center of the plaza is a statue of you, arms outstretched like you're welcoming the dawn. Bees are buzzing around the outstretched hands. A few people are pointing and laughing. A priest is praying. The local tax collector approaches, sweaty and nervous. "Your Radiance, they claim we overweighed the grain measures, that we shaved 1/10 off each load, and the bees, a symbolic flourish. You inspect the crowd. Some faces are angry, others just tired. Most are farmers, sun-darkened and linen-wrapped, standing with folded arms and firm jaws. One little girl tugs her father's robe and says, "Is that the bee-man?" You clear your throat and step forward. "People of the North," you say loudly, "I am not the bee-man." That gets a laugh. Good start. You signal for the scribe to take notes. Then you announce a temporary halt on new taxes pending review and declare that grain measurements must now be done with double witnesses. You also commission a beekeeper's shrine in the square because, well, symbolism. Mainstream fact: Egypt's entire economy ran on grain. Workers were paid in it. Priests stored it in temple granaries, and the state tightly regulated harvests and distributions. Disputes over grain could spark unrest, especially if the Nile flood was weak. As the crowd disperses, the tax collector breathes a sigh of relief and whispers, "Thank you, Your Holiness." You nod. Get stung once, shame on me. Get stung twice, enjoy your new post in the scorpion mines. Back at the palace, you strip off your dusty robe and settle into the scribe's chamber to review royal decrees. Today's stack is grim. Someone wants to rename every temple dog Fluff Adam. A nomarch is demanding permission to build a 100-cubit obelisk shaped like a fish. A poet asks for royal sponsorship of her new play. The Eye of Horus finds a hat. You sign the last one. If nothing else, you want to see how it ends. Your steward peeks in, holding a plate of figs and honey. Evening snack? You grab a fig and pop it into your mouth. Better than bees. Everything is better than bees, he agrees. You rise and wander the palace halls. Night has crept in quietly. Torches flicker on golden sconces, casting long shadows across stone walls etched with years of stories. You pause beside a mural of your grandfather standing triumphant over a conquered city. You always thought the artist made his feet too big. You continue to the observatory, one of your favorite places. Not because you know the constellations well, you don't, but because it's quiet and peaceful and filled with people who are too busy arguing about planetary alignments to ask you about taxes. Tonight, the sky is smeared with stars. The astronomer, an old woman with a quill behind her ear and ink stains on every finger, points to the heavens. "See that one?" she says. "The one that twitches?" You nod. "We believe it marks the passage of time. But which kind? Seasons? Rains? Lifespans?" No one agrees. Historians still argue whether Egyptian astronomy was primarily religious or practical. Some say it helped track agricultural cycles. Others insist the stars were messages from the gods. Most agree. It was a bit of both. She hands you a tablet with a sketch of Orion. "We're naming that one the Pharaohs belt." She smirks. "It's crooked." You smile. "Fitting." Quirky tidbit. Ancient Egyptian astronomers created star clocks by mapping the rising of specific stars at certain hours. They didn't just measure time, they performed it, turning the cosmos into a celestial calendar and stage. You return to your private chamber, remove your crown, which has somehow acquired a beetle, and let your shoulders sag. A servant brings a damp cloth and scented oil for your temples. "You smell like bees," he says. "Don't strut." You stretch out on the divan, gaze up at the painted ceiling, an image of Nut, the sky goddess arched across the heavens, and let yourself drift. Somewhere below, musicians are playing soft fuixia con mavos, and you imagine them serenading the Nile itself. Just as sleep starts to claim you, a papyrus scroll slides under your door. You groan, unwrap it, and read, Urgent. The temple geese have escaped. Again. You close your eyes. Tomorrow, you mutter, and finally, mercifully, you sleep. The first thing you hear when you wake is honking. Not metaphorical honking, not trumpets, not chants, just actual, relentless goose honking, echoing across your palace courtyard like some avian revolt has begun at dawn. You sit up slowly, hair tousled, eyes bleary, and whisper, they weren't joking about the geese. You shuffle to the balcony and look down. Chaos. A flock of white, furious temple geese is waddling in tight formation past the reflecting pool. Two guards are chasing them in figure eights. A scribe is standing on a bench, fending off one particularly aggressive goose with a rolled-up scroll. You mutter, is this divine punishment or just Tuesday? The geese had been sacred offerings to Amun, raised in temple ponds, and expected to behave with reverence and grace. Instead, they've staged a full-blown mutiny and apparently decided the royal herb garden was fair game. Mainstream fact, geese in ancient Egypt were indeed associated with fertility, offerings, and sometimes even the soul, the Ba. They were also a staple in temple rituals, especially those honoring Amun and Geb, the earth god. But no one ever said they were well-mannered. By the time you're dressed, the high priest of Amun arrives looking deeply offended, his robes slightly damp and one sandal missing. He bows stiffly. Your radiance, the sacred flock is displeased. You arch an eyebrow. Is that a holy judgment or just a coincidence? He sighs. Possibly both. The decision is made. An emergency appeasement ritual in the temple courtyard, complete with grain cakes, lotus wreaths, and a live performance of the Song of the Feathered Guardians. You attend reluctantly, mostly to ensure that the geese don't declare independence. The musicians sing, the priests chant, and you try not to laugh as one goose attempts to peck a tambourine. It's supposed to be solemn. It looks like a dance rehearsal for possessed poultry. Still, by midday, the flock is soothed, corralled back into their sacred pond, and the priests are satisfied that cosmic order has been restored, for now. You retreat to your library, the only place in Egypt where the scrolls outnumber the servants. This is your escape. Hundreds of papyrus rolls detailing everything from medical procedures to battle plans to odes about beer. You select one labeled on the handling of ointments and substances not to be eaten, but often are. The scribes had a dry sense of humor. Quirky tidbit. Egyptians wrote medical scrolls with wild ingredient lists. Ground ostrich shell, crushed lizard tail, even burned hippo dung. They categorized each with care, often noting if the treatment was effective or will probably just make the patient smell better. You spend the next hour scribbling comments in the margins. Who approved this one, you mutter, and why does everything involve honey? Then a knock. Your steward enters with an apologetic expression. Your Holiness, the foreign delegation from Hattie has arrived early. You freeze mid-scribble. The Hittites. Fantastic. They're known for their stone fortresses, confusing treaties, and uncanny ability to wear 30 pounds of jewelry without blinking. You haven't forgotten the last delegation. They brought a live bear and accidentally challenged a priest to a wrestling match. Still, diplomacy waits for no one. You change into your foreign visitor outfit, layered linen with lapis insets and a collar wide enough to make your neck ache. A translator stands by, holding a fan. You shoot him a look. If they ask to trade for papyrus again, tell them I said only if they stop mispronouncing it. He nods. Yes, Your Majesty. Not papyrus. Got it. You enter the Hall of Offerings, where the Hittite ambassador stands flanked by two stone-faced bodyguards and a truly impressive mustache. He bows deeply. Glory to the sun who walks in human form, he says. You blink. Thank you. Which one of us is that again? He laughs. You're not sure if it was a joke, but you decide to roll with it. He presents gifts: gold, cedar, a tiny bronze cow with comically wide eyes. You respond with perfume, embroidered linen, and a miniature model of the Temple of Karnak. The negotiations begin. Topics include marriage alliances, grain exchange, an obscure border dispute involving 6 trees and a goat, and a long debate about whose storm God has more authority in the rainy season. Historians still argue whether these diplomatic treaties were genuine peace efforts or glorified power displays. Some believe the gift exchanges were more important than the actual agreements. By the end of the meeting, you're exhausted, but a treaty is signed, a feast is scheduled, and the bronze cow has somehow ended up on your desk again. Back in your chamber, you let the translator collapse into a chair. How'd I do? You ask. You were stern but warm, and only insulted their moon god once. Good enough. Evening settles in, and with it comes the ritual of dream offering, meant to please the gods of sleep, prophecy, and moonlight. You sit in your private shrine, anointed with oils that smell like cinnamon and wet bark. A priestess places a sleeping charm beneath your pillow, a tiny figurine of Bess, the squat, lion-faced protector of dreams. She bows. May no shadows follow you. You mutter, especially not ones that honk. You lie back on your woven bed, the linen cool against your skin. Outside, the Nile hums softly. Frogs chirp near the banks, and the faint whisper of the flutes begins again. And just before sleep takes you, you swear you hear a single, defiant honk in the distance. You smile. Sacred or not, some things never change. Morning doesn't so much arrive as ambush you. A servant claps his hand softly near your sleeping ears, then steps back. Your Holiness, he says, with barely concealed dread. You're needed at the harbor. The Syrian shipment has arrived. With surprises. You groan. Surprises are for birthdays, not trade routes. Still, you rise, because Pharaoh. You make your way down the royal causeway, the morning sun slicing across the courtyards like a lazy blade. The Nile is already glittering, busy with boats and chatter, but at the royal dock, the scene is complicated. Several crates have burst open, revealing a tangled mess of incense, lapis, glass beads, and one very confused Syrian monkey now perched atop a customs officer's head. I assume this isn't standard procedure, you say dryly. The officer winces. Your radiance. They claimed it was a diplomatic gift. It's been eating the myrrh. You squint. The monkey grins. His teeth are blue. You rub your temples. Give it a title and a bowl of figs. If it survives the day, it can join the Treasury Department. As you sort through the rest of the cargo, a decent haul of cedar planks, purple dye, and a suspiciously large number of sacred juggling stones, you're reminded of just how far Egypt's trade network stretched. Mainstream fact: ancient Egypt's reach extended far beyond its borders, trading with Lebanon, Syria, Nubia, Punt, and even Minoan Crete. These routes brought not just materials, but culture, art, and the occasional wild animal that nobody asked for. Back at the palace, the monkey, now wearing a gold collar, has vanished. You sigh. If it ends up in the priest's bathhouse again, I'm blaming you, you tell the steward. I'm blaming Syria, he says flatly. You turn to more pressing matters. The great festival of the Sed, your renewal of kingship, ceremony. It's the biggest royal affair, short of your funeral, and it happens every 30 years, or whenever you feel insecure enough to need a divine rebranding. Lucky for you, insecurity is fashionable. You meet with the chief architect, a meticulous man whose kilt is always one pleat away from perfection. This year, he says, we're thinking bigger: an open arena, lotus banners, processions of dwarfs, dancers, and divine emblems, and hear me out, a full-sized wooden replica of the heavens. Does it move? You ask. He nods. Only if we light it on fire. You grin. Approved. Planning the said festival is no small task. Every detail, from crown selection to the angle of the sun at noon, must align perfectly. You're expected to run, ceremonially, around a court 4 times to prove you're still fit to rule. You've already arranged for the fastest scribes to document it from flattering angles. Quirky tidbit: some pharaohs faked parts of the Esed festival. Statues and steles show them running with suspiciously relaxed postures, suggesting that priests sometimes help the narrative along. You retire to the palace garden to rehearse your lines for the ceremonial address. I, chosen of Ra, the 2 lands' beating heart, declare this day. You pause, swat a fly, then sigh. Why is everything here either sacred or buzzing? Just then, a whisper at your elbow. Your personal astrologer, wrapped in midnight-colored linen and always arriving silently. The omens are strange, she says. You glance up. How strange. There is a pattern in the stars, repeating, like a bird that flies in circles. No sign of Seth's wrath, but also no favor from Maat. You shiver a little despite the heat. Historians still argue whether Egyptian astrologers wielded genuine political influence or served as ceremonial advisors. Some evidence suggests their predictions did sway major decisions, especially when stars aligned with war or coronation dates. You decide not to cancel the festival. Instead, you add an extra hymn to Ma'at and order the temple geese painted with protective symbols. Later that night, a messenger arrives in a flurry of dust and panic. He bows, nearly collapsing. Your Holiness, he gasps. The Nubian envoy approaches, with gifts and questions. You blink. What kind of questions? He gulps. They want to know why the last gifts we sent them included a scroll labeled "Herbal Remedies for Stubborn Mules." They are insulted. You sigh. Send an apology. And figs. Everyone likes figs. In your private chamber, the monkey reappears, dragging the beaded curtain off its rings and trying to chew on a sandal. You stare at it. If I give you a crown, will you govern Thebes? It makes a noise that sounds suspiciously like yes. You collapse into bed with the scroll of said speeches in one hand and a honey date in the other. Outside, the workers are already building the ceremonial gates, and someone's rehearsing chants about your eternal strength. You can't help but laugh. I'll trip over the first step, you whisper, and they'll just write that I flew. The monkey curls up at your feet. You don't stop it. The night is warm. The incense burns low, and for a few quiet hours, the only sound is the occasional sleepy chirp from the lotus pond and the gentle scratch of the astrologer's pen as she watches the heavens, waiting for something, anything, to make sense. You're woken this time, not by geese, not by monkeys, not by the sun. No, this time it's a harp, a single harp string, plucked with great confidence and questionable skill. You open one eye. Standing at the foot of your bed is a court musician, young, eager, and apparently auditioning at sunrise. Your radiance, he beams. I wrote a song for the Seed Fate Festival. You groan. Does it contain the word eternal more than 12 times? 15, he chirps. You wave a lazy hand. Perfect. Play it at the end, after everyone's already eaten. Once he's ushered away, still plucking, you rise to face another glittering, overcomplicated day. Preparations for the Esid festival are in full swing. In the palace courtyard, dancers are spinning with dyed linen streamers. Priests are chanting in uneven rhythm. And somewhere, the sacred baboon is missing again. Your steward jogs over, panting. He's in the embalming chamber, again, covered in natron. You blink. That's either a sign from the gods or the beginning of a terrible omen. The festival waits for no one, not even misplaced baboons. Today is the rehearsal for your ceremonial circuit, the symbolic run around the sacred court that proves your divine vitality. You stand at the starting line in full regalia, a heavy leopard skin cloak, the blue war crown, and sandals with tiny falcons carved into the soles. Mainstream. Fact. The Esed festival was one of the oldest and most elaborate rituals in ancient Egypt. Though originally tied to a pharaoh's 30th year of reign, many rulers, especially the more theatrical types, held it earlier to reinforce legitimacy or simply to show off. The crowd claps politely as you trot past. It's less of a run, more of a power saunter, and the priests discreetly shorten your third lap. One of them mutters, "May he be fast in the realm of the gods." Another replies, "He was faster last year." You shoot them a look. I can still hear you. Still, spirits are high, and the palace is buzzing. Artisans paint the divine pavilion with indigo and red ochre. Stonemasons smooth the last step of the Jubilee platform. And scribes practice their official record of the event, complete with appropriately florid metaphors. You glance at one scroll and read aloud. The king leapt like the oryx of Ra, his knees a blur, his breath a hurricane. You glance at the scribe. I walked. He doesn't blink. Poetic license, your eternity. You're ushered next to the feasting area for the divine banquet, another key piece of the said celebration. Rows of platters gleam with dates, roasted duck, lotus stew, and the ever-present beer jugs sealed with royal wax. Quirky tidbit: Egyptians often used blue lotus in their feasts, not just for flavor or decoration, but because it had mild psychoactive effects. There are entire banquet scenes in tombs showing guests swaying, dreamy-eyed, clutching wine and lotus flowers like the Nile had just whispered a lullaby into their ears. You take a whiff. Yep, definitely dreamy. Your high priest approaches, face grave. The statue of Maat is missing its ostrich feather. You blink. Again? It was stolen, possibly, by the monkey. You close your eyes. He has 3 collars now, and a growing fan base. The priest sighs. He might be divine. Let's not start a cult. The afternoon drips by like honey in the sun. More rehearsals, more titles, more gold dust sprinkled on everything that holds still long enough. A Nubian ambassador compliments your posture. A scribe requests permission to write a poem comparing your reign to the smell of freshly baked bread. You say yes. Who doesn't want to be remembered as comforting carbs? But there's something off today. The sky darkens too early. You look up. A solar eclipse begins to crawl across the heavens, the moon inching over the sun, like a curious cat covering a lamp. Gasps ripple through the courtyards. Some kneel, others whisper. The astrologer appears beside you, uninvited. There is interpretation needed. You raise an eyebrow. Let me guess. Omen of instability? Divine test? Or just an eclipse? She shrugs. But timing's weird. Historians still argue whether eclipses were seen as dire warnings or sacred moments of transformation in Egypt. Some temples record fear. Others suggest celebration, especially if it coincided with festivals. You decide to reframe. You raise both hands to the sky. The gods cast their shadow not to frighten us, but to cool our journey, to remind us that even the brightest king needs shade. It works. The crowd cheers. Someone faints in reverence. You wink at your scribe. Write that one down. I'll need it later. By evening, the darkness has passed. The light returns golden and soft, and the temple fires are lit in long, elegant lines. Musicians tune their instruments. Dancers stretch. The baboon is finally recaptured, now smeared in perfumed oil and looking smug. The great hall is ready. You enter to a roar of drums and the hum of sacred verses. The said platform gleams with obsidian tiles. You climb the steps slowly, each footfall echoing across the marble. Incense swirls around you. Frankincense, myrrh, and the sharp tang of blue lotus. At the summit, you raise your arms. You have seen me run, you say, and still I stand. Laughter trickles through the back rows. You smile. I have led, I have bled, I have danced poorly at 2 coronations. But Egypt endures. Because we endure, the high priest bows. Then we renew you, Pharaoh, as Ra renews the sun. Cheers, flutes, doves, possibly more monkeys. As the celebration ignites, you step back into the shadows of the columns and let the people dance. You watch, fingers still scented with resin and fig. Your mind drifts back to that eclipse, back to the stars, back to the strange, wobbly path you've walked to arrive at this moment. And for the first time in weeks, maybe longer, You feel oddly calm, still sacred, still human, still here. The seed festival is over, but the dust hasn't even had time to settle. Your sandals still bear the faint imprint of obsidian tile. Your arms ache from too many ceremonial blessings. And someone swears they saw the monkey offering grapes to a statue of Isis. You'll deal with that later. This morning, you're back in your audience chamber, draped in gold-threaded linen, a little less immortal and a little more sunburnt. Your vizier brings a stack of clay tablets, each one thicker than your patience. Petitions, he says. Of course they are. He places the top tablet carefully on a low table. This one's urgent. The fishermen near Memphis are demanding tax relief. They say the crocodiles are unionizing. You squint. That's not how unions work. He shrugs. They made a banner. You wave it off. Offer them nets with enchantments, or a priest with a strong jaw. You begin sifting through the day's decisions, adjusting temple donations, approving a new calendar stone for a provincial town, resolving a land dispute that involves two cousins, a collapsed canal, and a goat that may or may not be divine. Mainstream fact, pharaohs were not just ceremonial figureheads. They were the top judges in legal disputes, sometimes directly involved in resolving thorny issues between local officials, families, and temples. Many verdicts survive today, inscribed in dusty court records. Midway through tablet number 4, you pause. It's from your chief scribe. He's requesting permission to retire to a cave. Why a cave, you ask? Your vizier clears his throat. He says he's tired of metaphors and just wants a space with literal darkness. Hard to argue with that. The day drags on. Messengers come and go. One announces that the royal bakery has perfected a new bread shaped like your face. Another insists that the temples need more ink. Apparently, everyone's been enthusiastically copying your said speech. The version where you made the eclipse metaphor is already popular in 2 provinces. You ask, did they include the part about my sandals? Just the falcon part, the scribe nods. You grin. That's the best part. Then comes the big one. Your architects have completed the new addition to your tomb. You sigh. Already, it's been 12 months. We added the celestial ceiling and the golden sarcophagus room. Also, at your request, a secret tunnel for escape. I was joking about that. Too late. We carved a map and everything. You visit the site later that afternoon. The tomb is a masterpiece of excess. Stars painted with crushed lapis lazuli wink from above. The walls are etched with scenes of you triumphing over chaos, taming snakes, and hosting awkward dinner parties with various gods. There's even one scene of you slapping a foreign diplomat with a scroll. You don't remember doing that, but it does look cathartic. Quirky tidbit. Some royal tombs included fictional or exaggerated scenes of pharaohs' deeds, part political propaganda, part cosmic insurance. If the gods believed the stories, it meant better perks in the afterlife. A breeze wafts through the tunnel, carrying the scent of earth and sandstone. You pause before a depiction of Osiris, the god of the dead. Do you think he gets tired of all the flattery? You ask. Your architect shrugs. He doesn't have to read petitions about Goatland. Fair point. Historians still argue whether pharaohs genuinely believed in the elaborate afterlife scripts carved into their tombs, or simply performed the rituals to preserve political power. Some suggest belief and politics were one and the same, inseparable in a culture where the throne was half stone, half sky. Back at the palace, a surprise. Your daughter appears at the gates of the audience chamber, escorted by 2 guards and one very confused goose. She kneels. Father, I want to learn statecraft. You raise an eyebrow. Because the goose followed me here, and nobody's panicking. I think that's a sign. You sigh, smiling. That's about the level of logic we use in foreign policy. You agree to let her shadow you for a week, on the condition she never uses divine authority to steal figs from the market again. She rolls her eyes. That was one time. The sun is low now. Evening arrives like a cat, quiet, confident, and already curled up in your chair. You walk the outer balcony of the palace. Below, the city hums, potters at their wheels, children splashing in canal shallows, old men arguing about the price of barley. It's Egypt as it always has been. Wide and weary and wonder-filled. A servant brings you a cup of cool beer laced with herbs. You sip, watching the horizon blush in copper and violet. You remember your coronation, the first time you wore the double crown, the way it pinched, the way the crowd looked less like people and more like expectation. You remember the first petition, the first drought, the first night you couldn't sleep because a wall painting looked too judgmental. You remember laughing, often, maybe too much, maybe not enough. You remember your humanity, and you hope, somewhere, under stars and stone, etched in tomb walls or whispered by winds, that some part of you remains, not just as Pharaoh, but as a person who once ruled a kingdom that couldn't decide if baboons were sacred or just badly behaved. The monkey appears beside you, munching on a honey cake. You nod. I suppose you've earned it. He offers a crumb. You decline. Some things are better left symbolic. The city sleeps. Well, mostly. In the southern corner of the palace, a priest is still muttering through a recalibration of star charts. A baker stokes the oven for tomorrow's offering bread. Somewhere in the temple courtyard, a cat is yelling about something no one understands. You, meanwhile, sit beside a long, shallow basin of water, watching the reflection of the moon tremble with each passing breeze. The Sed festival is behind you. The rituals are done. The scrolls have been sealed. And tonight, this rare, unguarded evening is yours. You press a chilled cloth to your temple. The remnants of your crown have left marks. Again, a servant appears silently beside you. Would you like the sleeping draught, your radiance? You shake your head. Not yet. Tonight, sleep will have to earn its place. You wander through the western hall of the palace, your favorite one. Its pillars are wrapped with images of Nile reeds and papyrus blooms, but it's the floor mosaic that always draws you in. A map of your kingdom, from the marshes in the delta to the desert edges near Nubia, all done in inlaid stone. Somewhere near your heel is the quarry that broke half your chariot wheels. Near your toe, the fishing village where someone once declared, "A cat as mayor." You never denied it. You stand there a moment, just standing, breathing. Mainstream fact, pharaohs were believed to be gods on earth. But in practice, many expressed fears, frustrations, and doubts in private writings. Some graffiti left behind by royal workers even hints that kings were joked about behind closed doors, proof that absolute divinity didn't always shield from very human realities. You walk toward your private library, a narrow room with painted wood shelves and bundles of reed scrolls tied with faded red twine. Some are treaties, some are religious hymns, some are children's stories. One scroll falls open. It's a personal record written by one of your old scribes in a shaky hand. Today, his radiance laughed so hard at a foreign gift, an absurdly shaped melon, that he spilled wine on the treasury map. We redrew it. But now, there are two islands that may not exist. You laugh. You remember that melon. Quirky tidbit. Exotic tribute gifts to the pharaoh often included bizarre items: dancing pygmies, trained leopards, purple-dyed sandals, and once, allegedly, a live giraffe transported in a specially designed boat. Whether these gifts impressed or confused the court is anyone's guess. You sit, tracing your finger along the edge of the scroll, careful not to smudge the ink. It's strange how memory lives not just in stone, but in small things. Clay tablets, sandal straps, jokes no one else remembers. A soft knock. Your daughter steps in, barefoot. "I brought you figs," she says, "and not from the market." You raise an eyebrow. "So, legal figs." "Mostly." She sits beside you, offering the basket. Together, you nibble in silence. Outside, the wind shifts, the desert breathes, and something inside you settles. Historians still argue whether the greatest pharaohs were those who conquered the most land, built the tallest obelisks, or simply lasted the longest. But none of them ever found agreement on how a king should end his days. Should he fade quietly? Leave a final decree? Fake his death and join a caravan of poets heading for Byblos? You lean back against the cool wall and consider your own ending. Maybe it's this: a fig, a breeze, a memory of a melon, a child who still thinks you're worth sitting beside, even when your back hurts and your sandals squeak. Maybe that's enough. You rise slowly, brush off your robes, and turn to leave the chamber. But you pause at the doorway, glance once more at the pile of scrolls. You smile. Then you blow out the lamp. And now, let it all fade. Let the Nile grow quiet, its waters no longer rushing, but gently lapping against dark, glimmering reeds. Let the baboons find sleep among cool stones. Let the torchlight in the palace flicker once and go still. You are no longer walking among carved columns or dodging ceremonial parades. You are no longer adjusting your crown or solving disputes about barley thefts or misplaced monkeys. You are drifting now, drifting beyond the gold-trimmed thresholds and into the soft, silken hush of the after hour. Your sandals have been set aside. Your titles, every one of them, can rest just for a little while. The stars above Lower Egypt have begun their slow spin, eternal and lazy, circling the memory of Ra. The lotus blooms have closed for the night, their perfume thick and sweet in the cool air. Even the temple cat has settled, its golden eyes slowly blinking closed. You walk in dreams now, not as Pharaoh, not as a god, just as you. And in that quiet space between one breath and the next, something in the deep desert exhales, a slow, warm breath of sand and time and story. It wraps around you gently, like linen soaked in rosewater, like a voice humming through time. So rest now. The kingdom is safe. The sun will rise again, and you have earned your stillness. End of script. Sweet dreams.